His field guns blast away at its stone walls, until finally a breach is made. But when Napoleon sends a messenger to invite surrender, to spare both sides the horrors of an assault, the Ottomans cut off his head and display it from the city walls. Enraged French soldiers storm the breach and overwhelm the defenders. Then they flood into the city, embarking on a killing spree that lasts 24 hours. The sights were terrible, wrote one French witness. The sound of shots, the shrieks of women and fathers, piles of bodies, the smell of blood, the shouts of victors quarreling about loot. The butchery is indiscriminate. Women and children are slaughtered alongside 2,000 Ottoman soldiers. The next day, order is gradually restored. But more horrors are to come. In the aftermath of the sack of Jaffa, Napoleon finds himself with 3,000 Ottoman prisoners, who have been promised their lives. But with his troops and supplies already stretched thin, he is reluctant to spare any to guard or feed these unwanted captives. Besides, some are from the garrison of El Arish and have broken their oath not to take up arms against the French. And they beheaded his messenger. After conferring with his officers, Napoleon gives the order to execute the prisoners. Over 3 days, the French lead the prisoners in batches to the beach and slaughter them. Some are shot, some are simply driven into the sea, and by the 3rd day, French troops are ordered to use bayonets to save their ammunition. It is an atrocity that Napoleon will defend for the rest of his life. I had no choice, he insists, many years later. But the massacres provide easy propaganda for his enemies. While if the intention was to terrify his enemies, it seems only to have encouraged them to fight harder. As if by divine judgment, within days, hundreds of French soldiers fall sick with bubonic plague. Napoleon shows considerable bravery, visiting the sick in hospital, an act later celebrated by his own propaganda machine. Napoleon now heads towards his main objective, Acre. The ancient port city, famed for its role in the Crusades, is now the seat of the local Ottoman governor. He is Ahmed Pasha al-Jazar, known as the Butcher. For 25 years he has ruled Syria with an iron fist, and is notorious for his imaginative tortures and executions. He has ignored Napoleon's invitation to surrender, and what's more, unknown to Napoleon, 2 British ships of the line have arrived to support him. Napoleon arrives at Mount Carmel, 12 miles south of Acre, just in time to see the British capture a coastal convoy carrying his vital siege guns. Their loss is a massive blow to his hopes for a quick siege. On the 18th of March, the French arrive outside Acre's walls and start to dig in. Without their siege guns, the city's defenses are a major challenge. Acre bristles with 250 guns, is surrounded on 3 sides by the sea, and on the other by walls that are 8 feet thick. The British control the sea, ensuring easy resupply, and have landed marines, naval gun crews, and now Napoleon's own siege guns to bolster the defences. The British commander, Commodore Sir Sidney Smith, is energetic and full of ideas, while a French émigré, Antoine de Philippot, a former classmate of Napoleon's, provides expert siege advice. 10 days after their arrival, the French bombardment begins. Napoleon's field guns smash a small breach in the walls, but are then overwhelmed by counter-fire. 40 gunners are killed, and all but 3 guns disabled. Napoleon sends in his infantry with scaling ladders. A hidden moat breaks up their assault, while defenders blast them with muskets and hurl down rocks. The French hurriedly fall back in disorder. Any man left behind is likely to be decapitated. The butcher has offered a reward for every French head he has brought. The French then repel an Ottoman sortie, inflicting heavy losses. The siege of Acre enters a stalemate. Napoleon will wait for heavier guns to arrive from Alexandria before he risks another assault. But then, alarming news arrives to disrupt this plan. The Ottoman army gathering to the north, 40,000 strong, is on the move. Napoleon can spare just 4,000 men to face them. The odds seem insane, but Napoleon trusts in the training and experience of his troops, and particularly the quality of his officers. Unsure of the enemy's line of advance, he divides his force. On the 8th of April, at Nazareth, Junot locates and scatters an enemy cavalry force 10 times his number. 3 days later, Kleber defeats 5,000 at Cana, while Murat surprises another force north of Lake Galilee. On the 15th, General Kleber receives word that the main enemy force has swung round to the south and is camped near Mount Hamure, 8 miles from Mount Tabor. Seeking glory, Kleber advances with just his own division, intending to surprise the enemy at dawn. But he misjudges the march. When the sun rises, he's exposed on open ground, his 1,500 men facing 35,000. Kleber's division forms square, and under a scorching sun holds the enemy at bay for 10 hours. But they are running low on ammunition and desperate for reinforcements. Napoleon, meanwhile, is racing towards them with 2,500 men. He arrives just in time, attacking the Ottoman army from behind, taking them completely by surprise. Most of their forces are a peasant militia, and seized by panic, they flee in all directions. Kleber joins the attack. The Ottoman army disintegrates. At a cost of fewer than 300 casualties, Napoleon has destroyed the enemy relief force and secured control of Palestine. The fall of Acre must now surely follow. But at Acre, the situation is deteriorating for the French. Without control of the sea, they can do nothing to prevent supplies and reinforcements entering the city. While their own ammunition stocks are so low, men are sent to find spent cannonballs to fire back at the city. Most alarmingly, plague breaks out in the French camp, with around 20 new cases every day. Then, suddenly, a chance to end the siege. On the 24th of April, the French explode a mine under one of Acre's towers, causing serious damage. Napoleon orders an immediate assault. Hundreds of grenadiers charge forward, but once more they come under torrential fire and have to fall back. The clock is ticking for Napoleon. Surely it won't be long before the Ottoman army assembled at Rhodes makes its move. And he fears having to recross the Sinai Desert in high summer, when the heat will be lethal. Finally, on the 7th of May, Napoleon's replacement siege artillery arrives. Not wasting a moment, the French heavy guns opened fire next morning. Large sections of the city's crumbling walls are brought down. French troops attack at multiple points. Some fight their way into the city, but counterattacks by British Marines and Turkish troops throw them back. General Lannes is wounded in the neck and has to be dragged to safety, narrowly escaping the Pasha's head choppers. On the 10th of May, Napoleon calls on Kleber's grenadiers to make a final attempt on the city. "Nothing could be more beautiful than Kleber on the day of battle," remarks Napoleon, as the general leads his division forward with unflinching courage. General Bon advances with his troops in support. He is mortally wounded in the fighting. For all the French heroism and courage on display, the firepower, ferocity and skill of their enemy proves insurmountable. Napoleon, observing the attack from a forward battery, is knocked off his feet by a near miss. Finally, he accepts his men have done all that can be asked. The attempt to take Acre has failed. Acre is Napoleon's first major military defeat. The 4-month campaign will cost him 4,500 casualties, more than a third of his army's fighting strength. Nevertheless, Napoleon has succeeded in his main objective, neutralizing the threat from Syria. On the 20th of May, his army begins the 300-mile march back to Egypt. En route at Jaffa, Napoleon orders that around 50 of his men, riddled with plague and unable to march, be put out of their suffering with an overdose of laudanum. They are mercy killings. The victims would have suffered worse at the hands of the enemy. But the decision is still controversial. The French retreat continues into the desert. The heat is overpowering, and water in short supply. Morale is at rock bottom. Finally, after 25 days of marching, the army reaches Cairo on the 14th of June. Their return is marked by triumphal parades and celebrations across the city, organized by Napoleon. He is determined that his campaign be seen as a stunning success in Cairo and in France. The men have just a few weeks to rest. On the 15th of July, news arrives that the long-awaited Ottoman invasion has begun at Abu Qir. There is no time to lose. Napoleon must hit the enemy immediately, before he can break out into the Nile Delta. With most of the Cairo garrison, Murat's cavalry, and Kleber's division, 10,000 men in all, he races towards Abu Qir. The experienced Ottoman commander, Said Mustafa Pasha, has 9,000 men, entrenched in 2 defensive lines guarding the fortress of Abu Qir. His plan is to force the French to attack his strong defences. Napoleon is thrilled to learn this. The enemy has nowhere to run. At dawn on the 25th of July, he orders an all-out attack. The first Ottoman defensive line had not been completed and is overrun in minutes. French cavalry sweep around to cut off the Ottoman right flank. Hemmed in against the sea, the defenders panic and flee into the water, hoping to reach the ships offshore. Thousands drown. With D'Estaing's division advancing on the left, Lannes in the centre, and Murat's cavalry on the right, the French now advance against the second Ottoman line. Anchored by several redoubts, it resists the first assault. But when the French fall back, over-eager Turkish soldiers leave their entrenchments to pursue them. Murat seizes the moment and charges forward with his cavalry. The second line is overrun. Murat pushes on to the Ottoman camp, and despite a gunshot wound to the face, captures Mustafa Pasha at the point of his sword. By 1 p.m, the Turkish army has ceased to exist. Just 5,000 survivors remain, holed up in the fortress. They surrender 8 days later, on the 2nd of August. 1 year to the day after the destruction of Napoleon's fleet. The Battle of Abu Qir is a great victory for Napoleon, and does much to repair his reputation after defeat at Acre. But news now reaches him of developments in Europe, and for France, the news is not good. A new second coalition has been formed against France, led by Britain, Russia, and Austria. Their armies have won a series of battles against the French, reversing almost all Napoleon's gains in Italy, and now threaten the Republic with invasion. It is no time for France's best general to be far from home, unable to influence events. La Patrie is in danger. Napoleon's next move is not in doubt. On the evening of the 23rd of August, Napoleon quietly boards a frigate near Alexandria, with a small entourage, including Berthier, Marmont, Lannes, and Murat, and sails for France. To his army, he leaves only a short proclamation. The news from Europe had determined me to proceed to France. I leave the command of the army to General Kleber. The army shall hear from me forthwith. At present, I can say no more. It costs me much pain to quit troops to whom I am so strongly attached. General Kleber is not amused by his sudden promotion. "He's deserted us with his breeches full of merde," he declares. "When we get back to Europe, we'll rub his face in it." But Kleber will never return to Europe. The following summer, he is stabbed to death in Cairo by a young Muslim radical. The remnants of the French army in Egypt surrender to the British in 1801, following defeat at the Battle of Alexandria. They are later repatriated by the British Navy under the terms of a peace treaty. Napoleon's expedition to Egypt was a costly failure for France. Its aims, which had always been vague and opportunistic, became impossible following the destruction of the French fleet at Abu Qir. And though it has lived long in popular imagination, for every dashing act of heroism or romantic legend, there was a moment of immense brutality and terrible suffering. The expedition did have one positive legacy. Shortly before he left for France, Napoleon was invited to inspect a stone slab that his troops had pulled from the rubble while building a fort near the town of Rosetta. Dating to the 2nd century BC, the slab was inscribed with a royal decree. Uniquely, the same text appeared in Demotic, Ancient Greek, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. The French had to hand it over to the British under the terms of their surrender, which is why the Rosetta Stone now sits in the British Museum. 2 decades after its rediscovery, the stone proved the key to unlocking the lost language of Egyptian hieroglyphs and revolutionizing the study of ancient Egypt. This and other discoveries by the French savants spawned an entirely new discipline, Egyptology, the study of Egypt's distant past that continues to fascinate and amaze us to this day.